5 cases, 5 sets of questions nobody has answered. Not cold cases waiting on a DNA match, not mysteries that need more time. These are cases where investigators looked at everything they had and said, "We don't know." Cases where the more you look, the less it makes sense. Some happened recently. One goes back more than 50 years. None of them are solved. We're going through them one at a time. No speculation dressed up as fact. No dramatized reenactments filling in the gaps. Just what we know, what we don't, and the question still standing once you subtract every explanation that can't be the answer. Because that's what stays with you, not just what happened, but the detail that survives every theory. The thing that doesn't fit. The fact that shouldn't be there. A 19-year-old girl found dead inside a commercial oven during a Walmart night shift. A woman who checked into a hotel under a fake name, deliberately destroyed every trace of her real identity, and left nothing behind but a note written on hotel stationery. A man pulled from a remote Australian lake, his skull driven through with more than 30 nails. A family of 4 who vanished on Christmas Eve and left the presents still wrapped under the tree. And a teenager who walked to a phone booth in Munich at 2 in the morning, and whose bones turned up 68 miles away, in a forest so remote the police said no ordinary person would ever stumble across it. 5 cases. 5 dead ends. Let's start. The official investigation lasted about a month. Then police announced their conclusion: no foul play, case closed. What the official investigation never explained is how she got in. Gursimran Kaur was 19 years old. She had come to Canada from India with her mother, Mandip, around 2022. They were looking for something better, a country where ambition could get you somewhere. They settled in Halifax, Nova Scotia, and both found work at the same Walmart on Mumford Road. Not because they had no other options, because it was a start. Gursimran had been the valedictorian of her graduating class. She wanted to study medicine. Her family described her as driven, optimistic, a young woman who thought constantly about the future. On the night before she died, she had been at home with family, laughing. She had recently ordered something online, a package that arrived at their house 3 days after her death, addressed to a girl who was already gone. On October 19, 2024, both Gursimran and Mandip were working the same night shift. At some point during the shift, Mandip realized she hadn't seen her daughter in over an hour. She asked coworkers. People told her Gursimran was probably helping customers somewhere. Mandip called her daughter's phone. No answer. She called again. The phone was unreachable, not just unanswered, but off the network entirely. For Gursimran, who almost never turned her phone off, that was unusual enough to be alarming. Mandip started searching the store herself. She eventually got management involved. The search led them to the bakery section, to the back wall, to the walk-in oven. Something was seeping from beneath the door. Black, thick, viscous like tar. They opened the oven. Gursimran was inside, burned beyond recognition. Her body charred, lying next to the baking racks. The black liquid seeping under the door was what remained of her. Mandip collapsed on the floor. Police arrived and began their investigation. They reviewed surveillance footage. They conducted interviews across the store. After roughly 1 month, they released their findings. No evidence of foul play. Nova Scotia's Department of Labor investigated separately and found the oven was functioning correctly. No safety violations. No criminal referral. There are questions, police said, that may never have answers. And that was it. The investigation was closed. Here is what was never explained. Commercial walk-in ovens, the kind used in supermarket and big-box store bakeries, do not trap people. They are designed with an internal release mechanism, a lever or button, accessible from inside the oven, specifically so a person cannot accidentally become locked in. It is a basic safety feature, required by regulation. Employees who work in those areas are supposed to be shown the release on their first day in the bakery. Gursimran may never have been shown. Her primary role was not in the bakery. If she entered that oven for any reason and the door swung closed behind her, she might not have known the mechanism existed. She might have been feeling her way along the walls in the heat and the dark, looking for something that was right there and not finding it. But here is the second problem. Those ovens run at full operating temperature only when an exterior latch is engaged. On most models, the oven cannot reach the temperatures that cause this kind of damage unless something on the outside is physically closed. Which means, for that oven to have been running while Gersamrin was inside, someone outside the door had to have engaged it. That could have happened by accident. A coworker, following a routine they performed 100 times, latching the oven before walking away, not knowing anyone was inside. It happens. It is almost unthinkable, but it happens. Or it didn't happen by accident. Mandip has spoken publicly since her daughter's death. She was never given a satisfactory explanation of how Gersamrin ended up in the oven and couldn't escape. She does not believe her daughter took her own life. The night before, Gersamrin was happy. She had plans. She was thinking about medical school. She had ordered something online that was still on its way. If this was suicide, it is among the most unusual and severe methods on record. It is not impossible. People have ended their lives in far stranger circumstances, under conditions that looked nothing like what followed. But the profile doesn't fit. Not the person, not her documented state of mind, not the evidence of someone actively making plans for a future she intended to live. Which leaves accident or something darker. There is one more thing that has never been addressed publicly. Police reviewed the surveillance footage and said it showed no foul play. They have not said what it showed, not who was near the bakery section that night, not whether anyone was seen entering or leaving the area around the oven, not what the cameras captured in the minutes before Gersamrin was inside. A Walmart has cameras in nearly every corner of every department. That footage exists. Whatever it recorded, investigators saw it, drew a conclusion, and stopped talking. Gersamrin Kaur came to Canada to build something. She was 19 working nights at a Walmart, and she was going to go to medical school. Her mother worked beside her in the same building, same shift, same store. One of them walked out that night. How the other ended up in that oven nobody has said, not officially, not honestly. The investigation is closed. A woman in a black dress, lying on a hotel bed with a Bible open to Psalm 23 resting on her chest. Head to the west, feet to the east, pink lipstick applied, hair neatly combed, like she lay down to take a nap and simply didn't wake up. Except she chose every detail of that scene, including the part where no one would ever know who she was. On October 9, 1996, a woman called the Hotel Vintage Park in Seattle, Washington, and reserved a room. About 90 minutes later, she arrived. She paid for 2 nights in cash. She gave her name as Mary A. Anderson. She wrote down an address in Brooklyn and a phone number in Manhattan. She had no identifiable accent. Nothing remarkable about her, the clerk later said, except her handbag, olive green, woven leather. Expensive. She went to her room. She placed a Do Not Disturb sign on the door. No one saw her again for 2 days. On October 11th, she failed to check out at noon. A bellman was sent to room 214. He knocked. No answer. He tried to open the door. A deadbolt had been thrown from the inside. Management eventually forced entry. They found her on the bed in that black dress, Bible on her chest, lipstick on. The room was neat and orderly, no sign of struggle, every surface composed. She had died by mixing cyanide into a glass of Metamucil and drinking it, a clean method by design. She had positioned herself like someone lying down to rest. Police inventoried the room carefully. She had brought 2 luggage bags and packed with a certain deliberateness, 6 velour tracksuits hanging in the closet in emerald green, fuchsia, navy, and black, an iron, a kitchen bowl, 2 pairs of glasses, crystal light powder, Estee Lauder cosmetics and perfume, a bottle of unlabeled prescription pills no one could identify, and a pressed maple leaf, placed on top of a copy of the Seattle Weekly. She had no ID, no credit cards, no keys, no phone, nothing with her real name on it, nothing that could be traced back to a person, an address, a life. The note she left was written on hotel stationery. It read, "To whom it may concern, I have decided to end my own life. No one is responsible for my death. Mary Anderson. Postscript, I have no relatives. You can use my body as you choose." The medical examiner later noted that she had intentionally obliterated any means of identification. She still had her fingerprints. She hadn't harmed herself in any way that would prevent identification through evidence. What she had done was remove every document, every card, every object that bore her actual name. She hadn't destroyed herself. She had erased herself, methodically in advance with care. Police investigated her case with real effort. They ran her fingerprints through the FBI, Interpol, the Royal Canadian Mounted Police, American and Canadian missing persons databases. No match. They tracked the Metamucil lot number to a distribution point in Phoenix and lost the trail there. They studied her hands for calluses that might suggest a profession. Nothing conclusive. They checked the Manhattan phone number she'd given. It went nowhere. They checked the Brooklyn address. It was a real street, a real building, but there was no connection to her. There was hesitation in her signature when she checked in, as though she were composing the name as she wrote it, pausing, continuing, uncertain. Not the signature of someone writing their own name from memory. The pressed maple leaf suggested Canada. Chief Investigator Jerry Webster didn't think to pursue that lead seriously until months into the investigation. Whatever the leaf might have revealed, the window had narrowed. In 2023, advanced DNA analysis placed her biological ancestry in eastern Iran or Afghanistan, likely Persian heritage. The Iranian diaspora in North America is large. She was clearly acculturated, probably an American or Canadian citizen for most or all of her adult life. No accent, mid-range department store clothes, an iron she brought for her velour tracksuits. Someone was missing her, or had been once. A sister who stopped getting calls in October 1996, a cousin who assumed she'd moved, a friend who never knew what happened. She was 5 feet 8 inches tall. She weighed 240 pounds. She was somewhere between 33 and 45 years old. She had undergone breast surgery, likely a reduction. She had a copper IUD so old the serial number had worn away. She had never given birth. Her teeth were slightly crooked. Those details exist. They are specific. They belong to a real person with a real history, and that history is still out there somewhere, attached to a name nobody has matched to her yet. She was buried in Ballard, Washington. Grave 197A. The city spent $497 on her funeral. No service was held. No marker was placed. A reporter named Carol Smith, writing about her case for the Seattle Post-Intelligencer, described the direction of her body on that bed, head to the west, feet to the east, as like a ship gone down at sea. In some Islamic traditions, the dying are oriented toward Mecca. Given what DNA later suggested about her origins, some have wondered if the way she lay was intentional. A final ritual, something private between herself and whatever she still believed in. She planned everything about her death. The hotel, the dress, the Bible, the lipstick, the note, every detail chosen, every trace removed. The only thing she left behind that she didn't explain was that maple leaf. Pressed flat, placed on top of a magazine, like something she couldn't bring herself to throw away. It is April 2009. Two children are walking near a lake in New South Wales, Australia, when they spot something on the bank. A rolled rug, bound with electrical wire. They pull at it. Anthony Chen Liu was 27 years old. He had come to Australia from China, settled in Sydney, and worked as a businessman. The specifics of that business, what he dealt in, who he worked with, what his days looked like, have never been established clearly in public reporting. He had no family in Australia, no known romantic partner, no criminal record investigators ever cited. He was, to those few accounts that exist, a young man living quietly in a city that didn't know him well. Whatever his life contained before that April, it ended sometime before those two children found that rug on the bank of the lake. His body had been bound with electrical wires and extension cords, the kind you'd pull from a wall socket. He'd been wrapped in the rug and left at the water's edge, waited to stay. The cause of death, when investigators determined it, took a moment to process. He had been shot in the skull repeatedly with a nail gun. Not once, not twice. Over 32-inch nails driven into his head by what police described as a high-powered cordless nail gun. The kind used on construction sites to frame walls, drive timber, move fast. Someone had fired it into Anthony Liu's skull more than 30 times. Police released an X-ray of his head to the public, hoping to generate leads. The image was explicit, a cross-section of a human skull, dense with nails, overlapping, packed together. It circulated in Australian news outlets. It was meant to shock someone into talking. Nobody talked. Investigators searched for a motive and found nothing they could build a case on. No link to organized crime. No documented deaths or threats. No known enemies. They interviewed members of Sydney's Chinese community, followed every connection in his business dealings, and came up empty. Police stated publicly that they had no evidence connecting Anthony Liu to any criminal group. No one was ever arrested. No suspect was ever named publicly. The details of the murder point toward something personal, sustained, and deliberate. 30 nails is not a warning. A warning requires a survivor, a witness, someone to carry the message. This body was hidden, wrapped in a rug, bound with cord, left at the edge of a lake far from where he lived. The intention was not to send a message. The intention was to disappear him. And yet the method is excessive in a way that is hard to attribute to cold calculation alone. 30 nails. Someone held that nail gun and kept firing long after the first nails would have been fatal. That is not efficiency. That is something else. The theory most often raised is organized crime, a gambling debt, a business betrayal, a matter of face within a community that handles its affairs privately. In the Chinese immigrant communities of Sydney, social structure and obligation run deep. A financial default, a public disrespect, these carry consequences that don't surface in police files. If Anthony Liu crossed the wrong person or was mistaken for someone who had, the response could have been exactly this severe. But police said they had no evidence of that connection. Either they were right, or the community that knew the truth wasn't saying anything. What doesn't fit the organized crime theory is the binding, the rug, the choice to conceal the body rather than leave it as a message. Criminal groups who kill to demonstrate power leave bodies where they'll be found. They don't wrap them in extension cords and carry them to a lake. The person who did this was trying to hide what they'd done, which suggests either personal rather than professional motivation, or someone who panicked and improvised. Electrical wire, not rope, not zip ties, not anything brought for the purpose, whatever was at hand. The X-ray of Anthony Liu's skull has been available online for 15 years. It circulates occasionally when his case resurfaces in true crime threads and forums. His face is in those same articles, a photograph from when he was alive, a handsome young man in his 20s who came to Sydney with plans. Whoever held that nail gun has had 15 years to live their life. Anthony Liu had no family in Australia pressing for answers. Nobody who knew him well enough, or loudly enough, to force the case to stay open in the public eye. The image of his skull is the most detailed record of what was done to him. And it still has no name attached to it. The Christmas presents were still wrapped. Food was rotting in the refrigerator. Jacques' wages sat untouched in his bank account. The house looked exactly as it would look if a family had just stepped out for the evening and planned to be back in an hour. They were never back. Jacques and Perrette Metropolitan lived in the Cognac region of southwestern France with their 2 sons, Bruno and Eric. December 24, 1972. Christmas Eve. The family drove to a friend's home for the holiday dinner, something ordinary, the kind of evening that becomes a memory for everyone involved. They said their goodbyes sometime that night and left for home. The drive from Cognac to Boudier-Saint-Trojan is short, a few kilometers through the French countryside, through the December dark. They should have been home in minutes. They never arrived. No witnesses came forward. No phone call was ever made. No note. The Metropolitan family simply stopped existing somewhere between those 2 towns on a foggy winter night in a car that was never found. Police searched the area extensively. They found nothing, no wreckage, no signs of an accident, no trace of the Simca they'd been driving. Jacques' bank account went untouched that night and every night after. Neither he nor Perrette ever contacted anyone again. Neither did their children. 4 people drove away from a Christmas Eve dinner and left a house full of wrapped presents waiting for a morning that never came. There was something happening in that family before they disappeared. Perrette had been having an affair. Her lover, a man named Morris, knew about the troubles in the marriage, knew, in fact, that Perret had been thinking about leaving. Jacques had found out, and in the months before that December night, Jacques had said something to the people around him, something that the people who heard it remembered, especially after. He told them, if his wife was cheating on him, everyone would die and no one would find him. That sentence has hung over this case for more than 50 years. The night of December 24th was foggy. The road between Cognac and Baudier-Saint-Trojan runs alongside the Charente River. In winter, in fog at night, a car leaving the road might go into the water before anyone knew it had happened. Rivers are long. In 1972, underwater search technology was limited. A car that slipped beneath the surface could stay hidden for decades, and in some stretches of the Charente, a thorough search was never conducted. The prevailing theory is that Jacques drove his family into that river, that the sentence he'd spoken was a promise, that he made a decision on that drive in the dark and followed through on it. Maurice, Perret's lover, believed something different. He thought the family had moved to Australia. He held on to that possibility for years. Most investigators do not share his hope. In 2025, a new investigation was opened, 53 years after the disappearance. New technology, new searches, new attempts to finally answer the question that the original investigation couldn't. But the detail that doesn't resolve, the detail that stays, is the children. Bruno and Eric were in that car. They were boys. They had just had Christmas Eve dinner at their parents' friend's house, and they climbed into the back seat of the Simca for the short drive home, and whatever happened next happened to them too. If their father made a decision that night, those boys were passengers in it. They had no part in what Perret had done, no part in what Jacques felt. They were children riding home from Christmas Eve dinner. Did they sense something? Something in the silence or the speed or the angle of the car toward the river? In the last minutes before whatever happened, did Bruno or Eric know? The Christmas presents are still there, in the image of that house in 1972. The food that rotted in the refrigerator, the money that was never withdrawn. Jacques Méchanaud told people what he would do, and then he disappeared. The only part of his threat that turned out to be true was the last part. No one found him. What happens in less than 60 seconds? Not much usually. You check your phone, a light changes. 60 seconds is nothing, barely enough time for anything to begin. Sonja Engelbrecht was alone for less than 60 seconds, and then she was gone for 27 years. On the night of April 10, 1995, Sonja was 19 years old and studying business at a university in Munich. She'd spent the evening at a friend's apartment, and sometime after midnight the two of them left together, walking toward Stiegelmeierplatz, a square in the Maxvorstadt district of central Munich, where there was a public phone booth. Sonja needed to call her sister for a ride home. At the square, her companion saw his tram arriving. He handed Sonja his phone card so she could make the call, and he stepped aboard. The tram pulled away. One moment she was standing at the phone booth, then she was not. Her sister never received a call. Sonja never came home. She was reported missing and the search began, and it would last for 27 years. Sonja had a student travel card that would have let her ride the tram for free. The same line her friend boarded could have taken her to the central station, where a direct train ran to her home. She had the means to get back safely on her own. She didn't need to wait for her sister, and she didn't need to accept a ride from anyone she didn't know. Whatever happened at that phone booth happened fast. Someone she trusted, or someone she couldn't avoid, or something that left her no time to make the call. For 27 years she was missing. A website, Sonja Engelbrecht, was maintained for more than 2 decades, cataloging the details of her case, asking for anyone with information to come forward. Her family kept looking. The case stayed open. In 2022, they found her. Not in Munich, not anywhere close. Her remains were discovered in a rock crevice in a forest near Kipfenberg, a town in Bavaria, 100 kilometers north of where she disappeared, 68 miles. She had been wrapped in plastic bags, tarpaulins, and tape, carried hundreds of meters through rough terrain, no path, no trail to that specific place in those specific rocks. Police stated publicly that no casual hiker, no mushroom picker, No ordinary person walking through those woods would ever have found that spot by accident. Whoever hid her there knew that forest, knew it well enough to navigate it in darkness, or in winter, or under conditions that demanded precision, and knew exactly where a body, carefully wrapped, would remain hidden for decades. Among her remains, investigators found a blanket, polyacrylic with a distinctive pattern. In 2023, police brought it to national television, held it up, and asked whether anyone had ever seen it before. Thousands of viewers called in. Thousands of people recognized the blanket, which told investigators it was mass-produced, not rare, not unusual, not a unique object traceable to a single shop or manufacturer. Whether any of those thousands of calls produced a viable lead has never been confirmed publicly. The case is still open. DNA evidence was collected from her remains. A reward of €10,000 has been offered for information leading to a suspect. As of this year, no one has been charged. The friend who was with her that night was 17 years old in 1995. He had no car. Kipfenberg is 100 kilometers from Munich. You need a vehicle and knowledge of the roads and knowledge of those specific woods. He was investigated and cleared early. Police have never publicly named a suspect. What remains is this. Someone drove Sonja Engelbrecht 100 kilometers from a phone booth in Munich to a forest in Bavaria, wrapped her carefully, walked hundreds of meters through rough terrain, chose a hiding place in the rock that required intimate knowledge of the landscape, and then went home, and has lived for 30 years with that knowledge. The blanket is in a laboratory. Thousands of people recognized it. The DNA is in a database. The forest near Kipfenberg has given up what it held. Somewhere in those thousands of phone calls, in that DNA, in the specific details of how a body travels 100 kilometers and ends up in a specific crevice in a specific forest, somewhere in there is the answer. It hasn't been found yet. Sonja Engelbrecht was 19. She was standing at a phone booth at 2 in the morning with a borrowed phone card, waiting to call her sister. 5 cases, 5 questions with no answers. 5 people who were somewhere ordinary, a workplace, a hotel room, a lake's edge, a car on Christmas Eve, a phone booth at night, and then were not. The call never went through. The sister waited.